Welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts a Ting, and we have more Romanian history for you here, and this one is called What Made Vlad the Impaler a Legend? And it's by Forgotten History. Vlad the Impaler. I mean, such a poignant, I should say, person in history. You hear so much things about him outside of Romania. All you hear is all the awful things he's said that he's done, and this picture of him being this vicious person that just going in and willy-nilly just doing stuff. And the more I get to know about the history and stuff like that, and understand the wars that he was in, and I'm understanding more of what he meant to the Romanian people and things like that. So we're going to look at some more about his history and things, see what it is, you know what I mean? Let the rest of the world know it's not just about Dracula, you know what I mean? That fantastical thing that they came up with. This is an actual person in Romanian history. And there's a history behind everything that he did and, he accomplished and everything. So let's go ahead and simmer. And I promise you stay because this one is going to be very interesting. You're getting the truth,
When Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453, his forces already occupied much of the Balkans and threatened and occupied much of Eastern and Central Europe. Mehmed was expanding his empire west, north, and east. But there was one region that was a critical thorn in his side: the Kingdom of Wallachia in modern-day Romania. His nemesis was a prince who had become infamous throughout history, and a household name thanks to a Jewish-Irish novelist. Who was Vlad the Impaler, and how did he get his name? Why was his rule and resistance to the Ottoman Turks so legendary and controversial? How did he become the most famous ruler of the Middle Ages, becoming a part of literary, historical, and cinematic folklore?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps scout sniper, history professor, historian, and book author. And we've answered these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Vlad the Impaler, also known as Vlad III Dracula, or in Romanian, Vlad III Draculea, was also called Vlad Tepes, was born in 1431 in Sighișoara, Transylvania, now in Romania. He was the second of four brothers, born into the noble family of Vlad II Dracul, with Dracula meaning son of Dracul.
Dracul.
This name derives from the Latin word Draco, or dragon, after his father's induction into the Order of the Dragon. This order was created by Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund for those who fought in defense of Christian Europe against the Ottoman Empire. During this period, Wallachia was allowed to retain its own dynasty, territory, and religion. The caveat was that it had to pay tribute and grant trade concessions to the Ottoman Empire and submit much of its agricultural produce. The principality was allowed to follow its own foreign policy, as long as they did not conflict with Turkish policies, and any ruler of Wallachia had to be approved by the Sultan. Vlad found these restrictions unbearable. Vlad moved to Târgoviște, Wallachia, in 1436, when his father assumed the leadership of the Wallachian Voivodate, or Principality. In 1442, the future Vlad III and his younger brother, Radu the Handsome, were sent to the court of Ottoman Sultan Murad II, who supported his rule with conditions. Murad was the father of Mehmed. The boys were sent to the father of Mehmed II as collateral. This was a commonly accepted practice, to submit or even exchange hostages amongst belligerents, and the brothers were sent to assure Murad that their father would toe the line and support Ottoman policies.
Isn't that crazy how they did that? Like they were just sending, I mean, they had no choice, but how people send kids off to like the enemy, and they live there. The thing about it is, though, that from what I read in earlier history and stuff that I've reacted to, If it's boys, they usually train them for the military. So in essence, what was happening is that they training the future generals that's going to fight against them. Because we know Vlad didn't like being a vassal or whatever they call them of the Ottoman Turks. He didn't like being under their thumb, where they have to pay them taxes and send soldiers off, to fight if they get into trouble and stuff. I wouldn't, because then it wouldn't be my land. I'd be indebted to somebody else. You know what I mean? And that's just crazy. They could start a war on the other side of the world and said, "You need to send some men here so that we can fight." And they should be loyal to us. That's some tough conditions to live under.
In November 1447, John Hunyadi and his Hungarians launched an attack against Wallachia due to its alliance with the Ottomans by the treaty signed by Vlad II and his duplicity in the Varna campaign of 10 November 1444. Vlad was accused of turning on his fellow Christians and joining the Ottomans as the two armies clashed at the Battle of Varna, near the Black Sea fortress of Varna, Bulgaria. The Ottomans won a decisive victory despite heavy losses, while the Crusaders lost King Vladislav and over 15,000 men. Radu's and young Vlad's father fled, but their older brother, Mircea II, was captured by boyars from Târgovişte and blinded with a red-hot poker before being buried alive. Vlad the Impaler took note of every event against his family. A short time after their father was also captured and killed by the forces of John Hunyadi, Vlad III was released in 1448. He became Murad II's chosen candidate for the throne of Wallachia, believing that Vlad would be more compliant than his older brother and father. Vlad would lose and regain his throne several times before losing battles with Murad II and the Hungarians and going into hiding. The first time he would rule for only a matter of months. Vlad returned in 1448 after the assassination of his father and elder brother at the hands of Wallachian boyars, or the nobles, the previous year. His younger brother remained with the Sultan, adopted Islam, and thus became an enemy. Mehmet II assumed the throne in 1451, and he was preoccupied with his long-standing desire to take Constantinople, which Vlad III used to his advantage. Vlad drafted an enemies list and sent his spies to locate every one of them. Vlad began a series of military campaigns to regain his father's seat. Among his enemies were the Romanian nobles, which included the boyars, who also followed the Sultan. Vlad launched an attack and was victorious in 1448, but he was deposed only after 2 months with assistance from the pro-Ottoman boyars. After an 8-year struggle where assassination and execution were his weapons of choice against his local enemies, Vlad gathered an army and again won a decisive victory, claimed the principality, and was ruler. He had adapted a new method of psychological warfare. Vlad also had problems with the Hungarians and Saxons who wanted to reclaim the region for their own kingdoms, which only heightened and intensified his precarious position, squeezed between two enemies.
Man, there's so much going on there. The Hungarians and this other group wanted it. He's fighting the Ottomans, local people, and he's fighting the Christians. And there's just all this stuff going on around this guy. That's some total confusion there. I mean, you have to have iron will to exist in that sort of chaos. Because you never know who is coming for you. Anybody could capture you and take you out. To survive through all of that 8 years of battles, I mean, can you imagine how many plots were made to try to get at this at him? And of course, we wouldn't come close to knowing how many there was. You know what I'm saying?
Vlad would gather his captured enemies and have sharpened spears that were pushed into the rectum of a person up through the chest cavity. Then the long spear would be planted into the ground, supporting the weight of the still living victim. He used this method of torture on foreign and domestic enemies alike. This was brought to full visual observation after he won what has become known as the Night Battle on 16 and 17 June 1462. when he left a field decorated with over 23,000 Ottoman soldiers impaled. And the legend was born that he collected their blood in jars, and having feasts near their bodies, he would dip his bread in these jars of blood and eat it. All of this may have just been propaganda to incite Christian resistance against him. The Ottomans were led by the Janissaries. The Greeks.
See, yeah, it's kind of like how they said that all the Africans are cannibals, and if they capture you, they'll eat you because it'll make you stronger. Da 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 da. Can you imagine how many times in history these folklores, these folk tales have been told about people who they couldn't understand why they have this resilience and this strength, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that's just crazy. Yeah? And we keep doing it over and over and over. You know what I mean? Modern times, they use other methods to say, hey, we need to take care of them because they did this or they do that according to our moral standings.
Slave mercenaries in service to the Ottomans, who were commanded by Vlad's brother Radu. Radu then went to all of the regions that had been punished by his brother, especially the Saxons, to get their alliance to the Sultan. Vlad's first wife, who bore him a son, who became known later in life as Minia the Evil, was said to have committed suicide, rather than be taken by her brother-in-law Radu and his Janissaries, which was said to have driven Vlad to insanity. The deals Radu offered in the name of Mehmed II were good to be passed up, so Vlad found himself vastly outnumbered on all fronts. Many of the other Christians in the region feared Vlad more than the Turks due to his methods. Vlad never forgave a betrayal, and he was ruthless in his punishments. He had once convinced dozens of the most prominent boyars, nobles from Hungary, Saxony, and throughout Romania, to a massive banquet to bury the hatchet, so to speak, and negotiate a peace treaty. Finding this welcoming news, Mehmet II saw this as a positive development. He even sent his personal emissary to monitor the event. During this time, he conducted public executions of traitors. After the boyars were all seated, Vlad's men sealed the door and windows and burned the occupants alive. He sent the message of his deed back personally with the Mehmet's emissary after he nailed the man's turban to his head. Vlad's reasoning for the cruelty of impaling was to intimidate any Ottoman forces that followed. However, his methods frightened even his Christian allies, who feared Ottoman retribution. Later that same year, he escaped Ottoman capture, only to be captured by soldiers of Hungarian King Matthias Corvinus I, to whom Vlad was related by marriage. Vlad had agreed to marry a cousin of Matthias Corvinus, Ilona Shalagi, in order to have a treaty and to be released from jail. The deal was that Vlad would not attack Hungarian territory and stop impaling their soldiers, and he also had to convert to Catholicism and marry Ilona. They were married in 1474, and Vlad converted in 1475. Vlad had previously asked for his assistance, as well as support from the church in Rome, which was initially denied. But instead of receiving help, he found himself arrested and thrown into the dungeon over false charges of treason. His brother Radu was placed on the throne. Vlad regained his seat in 1476, but was reportedly killed in battle the same year in a coalition force that trapped him in his mountain fortress. It is possible that Vlad Tepes disappeared in the battle, just one of thousands of anonymous dead. Others claim that he was in fact imprisoned by the Turks. His daughter, Maria, was meanwhile brought to the Neapolitan court in Italy, whose ruling family was allied with her Dracul family. She was adopted and eventually married a Neapolitan nobleman. Some researchers state that he was ransomed at high price to his daughter and died in Naples. The final grave containing Vlad's remains has been a mystery for almost 600 years. He was supposedly enshrined in a sarcophagus after his death in Bucharest, but in 1931 the site was excavated and only animal bones were found. Medieval history scholar Raffaello Glini followed up on the discovery made by Erica Stella, a student writing a dissertation on Piazza Santa Maria la Nova Church in Naples, who found a headstone she believes belongs to Vlad. Glini said the early 16th century tomb is covered in images and symbols of the House of Transylvania, Carpathians, bearing the symbol of Dracul, and not the tomb of an Italian nobleman. The tomb could be that of Vlad's daughter or her offspring. Currently, they are awaiting permission for DNA testing on the remains. Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, has remained a folklore hero in the region for his efforts against Ottoman encroachment and was the most prominent symbol of Romanian independence, and he is still revered. Irish author Abraham Stoker, better known as Bram Stoker, traveled to the area in the 19th century and was doing research. He heard the stories of Vlad, and from his information gathering and own fertile mind, created perhaps the most undead monster in the history of literature. And the rest is, of course, history.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History.
Wow, wow. I'm telling you, man. Let me take this off here. But I'm telling you, I want to be honest. I didn't think that Dracula was based off of a real person for the longest while until I started paying attention to Romanian history. And then after a while, after a little research, I was like, well, wait a minute, this is based on somebody who actually lived. But they took literary, what was that word I'm looking for? Where they wrote, okay, it's historical fiction. Let's put it that way. They took liberties, literary liberties, and embellished certain parts of the story. You understand what I mean? Which, of course, people paid attention to the part about the impaling more than anything else, and not the whole thing that was going on there at the time. Because I am quite sure that other groups of people were doing things crazy too. But it served the narrative when dealing with him to paint him that way. So you know that because those times they did all kinds of crazy stuff like like that. But he was living in a powder keg, man, of just things going on. And the thing about it is, it's like they would marry enemies. They would go to enemies' houses and live, as kids. They would be in one group is the ally, and then that group becomes the enemy, and the enemy becomes the ally, and nobody could have been trusting anybody then, man. That's a hell of a way to live. But when you're fighting for a cause, I guess you will endure any kind of mental stress or anything like that. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this here and you learned something about history a little bit. Of course, do more research on Vlad and see more about him. I know certain of the YouTube channels, other ones have stories about specific wars that he was in and stuff like that, and his victories and his losses and all of that stuff, and they go into more detail. So check those out. In there, you're going to get the truth about everything. If you like the video, drop a like on the video, comment down below, tell me what's going on. I'll leave links for other videos that I've reacted to on Romania. Check them out. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, all right?